All I'm asking for is one more night alive." Those were the quiet, desperate words of Luna Moretti when she was caught in the act of taking a box of protein milk. As the officers reached for the cuffs, her eyes locked on a single object swinging against her chest, a battered, rust-stained military dog tag. Within hours, the nation would learn who she truly was, a former Navy SEAL who had once rescued dozens during classified missions, now left to drift through the streets of Seattle, the result of a broken system and a promise she could never fulfill to the one she loved most. Luna Moretti, 58, is a name few recall, but a face everyone in Capitol Hill recognizes, the neighborhood where she has lived without a home for nearly a decade. Thin, with wind-tangled gray hair and eyes permanently reddened from cold and coughing, she carries an old military rucksack made from faded camouflage canvas, its straps worn to threads, the same standard issue once given to Navy SEALs. Locals are used to seeing her collect empty cans. She never begs, never causes a scene, only moving in quiet avoidance, as if apologizing for existing. What no one knows is that Luna served 22 years in the U.S. Navy, including 8 special operations deployments to global hotspots: Fallujah, Ramadi, Helmand. In those places, she was more than a soldier. She was the anchor of her team, the steady voice in the fiercest moments. Her comrades called her Anchor because she never faltered. But the one thing she couldn't save was her own husband. In 2011, her husband Marco died from complications of liver cancer, a disease that should have been caught early if not for a missed test result at the VA hospital. For 3 straight weeks, Luna sat by his hospital bed without leaving once. When Marco took his last breath, she didn't cry. She simply stayed there, holding his hand for nearly 2 hours, as though if she never let go, he might not leave. After the funeral, Luna closed her bank account, sold the house, and donated all her money to the charity where Marco had once volunteered. She left her papers neatly on the kitchen table and walked away, no farewell, no forwarding address. To the government, she had exited the system. To society, she became a ghost. To herself, she ceased to exist. Now she lives on the city's margins, sleeping behind bus shelters and under the awnings of shuttered shops. On rainy nights, she spreads an old poncho across the cold concrete and curls into herself as if still lying in a trench under fire. Each morning, she wakes before dawn, packing everything away without leaving a trace. She once said, "The battlefield taught me never to give away my position. The streets are no different." Other homeless people call her Ghost because she appears and vanishes like a breath, never staying in the same spot 2 nights in a row. A few restaurant workers who recognize her quietly leave scraps in a bin out back, but she rarely says more than a sentence to anyone. She doesn't ask for help. She doesn't complain. She just lives, or rather, endures. Once, in a charity kitchen on a cold, rainy afternoon, Luna spoke to a student volunteer just enough for words that would be remembered forever. "I learned how to survive under fire, but no one taught me how to live after he was gone." The words faded into the sound of the rain. No one asked more, and Luna offered no explanation. She rose, pulled her collar up, and slipped away as if she had never been there. But soon no one will be able to walk past her like that again. Have you ever passed by someone never realizing you had just brushed against an entire forgotten epic?
Welcome to Veteran Life Stories, where real sacrifice meets unforgettable storytelling. Subscribe and keep their courage alive.
He stepped into the store before the sun had crested the roof of the 2nd floor. Rain fell, cold and damp, the wind cutting through layers of coats long past their ability to keep warmth in. Cole didn't look around. He knew this shop, knew the camera's location, knew the quiet hours, knew that the owner would step out from behind the counter to help elderly customers pay. This wasn't a plan. It was the survival instinct of a man who had lived by analyzing every nook and cranny in seconds. The protein milk sat on the bottom shelf. A cheap brand, nearly expired, its silver label worn. His hand trembled as he picked it up. Not from fear, but because it was the only thing he'd thought about for 3 days. His stomach was hollow, his throat raw, and his coughs were lasting longer than usual. He shoved the carton inside his coat, zipping it just halfway. Then he turned slowly toward the door. "Stop," a voice rang out from behind the counter. Not loud, but firm. The shopkeeper had installed a new corner mirror. He saw the entire motion. His finger hovered over his phone. "I'm calling the police." Cole froze. He didn't argue, didn't bolt. He turned back, pulled off his hood. Rain dripped from his collar. "I just need enough strength to live one more night," he said, his voice barely audible. The police arrived 6 minutes later. 2 officers. The younger one, Rivera, a Latino man, still awkward as he took notes. The senior officer moved with practiced efficiency, processing the incident quickly. As Rivera bent down to cuff him, he paused. A chain glinted beneath Cole's collar, a military dog tag, so old the letters were faded, but still legible. Name, blood type, unit code. "You used to be a SEAL?" Rivera asked, surprise evident in his tone. Cole said nothing, only nodded. No reason to explain further. Outside, the rain intensified. At the King County precinct, his file was sparse. No address, no next of kin, a handful of prior detentions for food theft. The officers filed their report, sent it on to the prosecutor, just another petty theft case. They knew nothing of night missions in Helmand, nothing of SEAL teams returning under fire to rescue trapped comrades in the desert. A few hours later, the prosecutor's office recommended holding him until trial. The reason was simple. Cole was homeless, had no fixed residence, and a record of minor offenses. His case quickly landed on the summary docket, a name unworthy of notice among hundreds of files. No one knew that the judge assigned to the case was Daniel Whitaker, a former Marine deployed to Fallujah in 2004. It was a SEAL team that saved his unit when they were surrounded. The SEAL commander who barked over the radio, "I'll get them out, no matter what," that was Cole Mercer. But time and war had blurred the details, and Whitaker had no inkling he would encounter that name not in uniform, but on a defendant's roll. When he opened the file that evening and read, "Mercer, Cole A.," his hand froze. Why would a man like that be arrested for stealing a carton of milk? And why had he been living on the streets for years without anyone recognizing him? Sometimes justice begins with the smallest questions, and sometimes the most significant reunions in life come under the most unexpected circumstances. What do you think happens when the judge realizes the very man who saved his life now stands before the bench? Relax and leave a 1 or comment, "I'm still here," to keep listening. She entered the small grocery just before the sun climbed over the second-floor roofline. Rain came down in icy sheets, the wind cutting through coats that had long since lost their warmth. Luna Moretti didn't glance around. She knew this place where the camera hung when the aisles stayed quiet, and how the owner always stepped away from the counter to help elderly customers count their change. It wasn't some premeditated scheme. It was muscle memory, the instinct of someone who'd spent years reading a room in seconds. The protein milk was on the bottom shelf. A generic brand, nearly expired, its silver label dulled by wear. Her hand shook as she reached for it, not out of fear, but because she'd thought of nothing else for 3 days. Her stomach was a hollow ache, her throat scraped raw, and the coughing fits were lasting longer than before. She slid the carton into her coat, zipping it only halfway, then turned slowly toward the door. "Stop." The word came from behind the counter firm, steady, not raised. A new corner mirror had given the shopkeeper the full view. His finger hovered above his phone. "I'm calling the police." Luna stopped. She didn't argue, didn't run. Pulling back her hood, she let the rain drip from her hair and collar. "I just need enough strength to make it through one more night," she murmured, barely above a whisper. The officers arrived in 6 minutes, 2 of them. The younger, Rivera, a Latino man still finding his rhythm, scribbled notes. The older one moved with practiced detachment, processing the scene without hesitation. When Rivera bent to cuff her, something caught the light. A tarnished chain beneath her collar. A military dog tag, letters worn but readable name, blood type, unit code. "You were a SEAL?" Rivera asked, startled. Luna only gave a slight nod. There was nothing more to say. Outside, the rain grew heavier. At the King County precinct, her file was thin. No address, no next of kin, a handful of prior detentions for food theft. The report went to the prosecutor, just another petty theft. No one in that room knew about midnight insertions into Helmand, or the SEAL teams who charged back under fire to pull out trapped comrades. Hours later, the prosecutor recommended holding her until trial. The logic was simple. No fixed residence, a record of minor offenses. Her name was dropped onto the summary docket, one case among hundreds. No one realized that the judge assigned to the hearing was Daniel Whitaker, a former Marine who had fought in Fallujah in 2004. Back then, a SEAL team had saved his unit from being overrun. The commander who'd shouted over the radio, "I'll get them out no matter what." That had been Luna Moretti. Time and war had blurred the edges of memory, and Whitaker had no reason to expect he'd see that name again, certainly not in a defendant's file. But when he opened it that evening and read Moretti, Luna R., his hand went still. Why would the woman who once saved his life be standing in court for stealing a carton of milk? And how had she been living on the streets for years without anyone noticing? Sometimes justice begins with the smallest of questions. And sometimes the most profound reunions in life arrive in the unlikeliest of courtrooms. What do you think happens when the judge realizes the person before him is the very one who saved him? Type 1 or comment, "I'm still here," to hear the rest. There are people who vanish from public view not because of guilt, but because the world has forgotten how to speak their name. When Judge Daniel Whitaker realized that the name Luna R. Moretti belonged to the woman who had once carried him out of the chaos of Fallujah in 2004, he knew this could not be chance. He had to know the truth. Using the special access granted to him during his time on a military transition oversight board, Whitaker called the Northwest Regional Office of the Department of Veterans Affairs and requested that long-archived records silent for over a decade be brought back to life. 12 hours later, lines of data slowly appeared on his screen like a reluctant confession. Luna Moretti had been among the Navy SEAL's most elite operators during the Middle Eastern campaigns. She had earned the Silver Star for fearless leadership during a hostage rescue in Kunduz, the Bronze Star with valor for leading a night raid in Ramadi under relentless fire, and the Purple Heart for wounds sustained during the Fallujah withdrawal, an injury that permanently damaged her left hip. In one detailed report, she was recorded as carrying a wounded Marine Whitaker himself nearly 2 miles through active gunfire. Yet all those medals couldn't stop her from being erased. In 2009, during the nationwide migration to a new veterans data system, a clerical glitch marked her address as invalid. Mail was returned, no follow-up calls were made, no one checked further. Without warning, the system removed her from the monthly stipend list and canceled her healthcare access. The bitter twist? At that very time, Luna was caring for her husband Marco, whose liver cancer had been misdiagnosed at that same VA hospital. When he died, she fell into a long, unbroken silence. No appeals. No requests for review. She turned away from the system just as the system had turned away from the person she loved most. For the next 14 years, she existed like a shadow in the heart of the city. No home, no health insurance, no access to veteran mental health care, and no one asked why. A woman who had risked her life for others now fought each night just to keep a shred of warmth in her lungs as she slept against cold brick walls. Whitaker held the nearly 80-page file in his hands, heavier than any indictment he had ever read, not because of the number of pages, but because of the moral weight it carried. This was no longer about a stolen carton of milk. It was proof of a system that had abandoned the very people who had defended it. Quietly, he sent the entire record to the public defender's office, urging them to re-examine the case through a veteran's lens. He called 3 of Luna's former teammates, all of whom confirmed the reports and spoke of their deep respect for her. Moretti never left anyone behind, one of them said, even when she had nothing left. A grainy photograph from 2004 now lay before Whitaker Luna, lifting a wounded boy toward a medevac helicopter, the air clouded with dust and smoke. It had once appeared on page 3 of a national newspaper before fading into obscurity. Now, it stood as undeniable proof not only of an event, but of a collective forgetting. Staring out the window into the rain, Whitaker wondered, if he had failed to recognize the woman who had once saved his life, how much longer would it take before Luna was seen again, not as a homeless stranger, but as a human being? How many more people like Luna Moretti are disappearing every day, every night, because the system has no memory? My dear audience, the next chapter will move you even deeper. Please like the video, subscribe, and share in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love seeing this community connect from every corner of the world. The next morning, Seattle's sky hung heavy in its usual gray, but inside the King County courtroom, the air felt different. Seats that were often empty were now filled to capacity. Fellow veterans in uniform, local reporters, and even residents who had once seen Luna Moretti quietly gathering empty cans outside a cafe, all gathered to witness who she truly was. She was escorted and wearing clothing donated by a veterans support organization, her hair neatly trimmed, her face clean-shaven of its weariness, yet her eyes remained unchanged, silent, steady, without expectation. She sat beside an elderly attorney from the Special Operations Veterans Legal Aid Society, the one who had volunteered to represent her the moment her military record became public. Judge Whitaker entered with a composed expression, the file he had studied all night in his hand, and without the usual preamble, fixed his gaze on Luna. "Miss Moretti," he said, "is there anything you wish to tell the court before we hear testimony?" Luna's voice was low but unshaken as she replied, "I would like to remain silent just as I have for the past 14 years. The room went still. It was not an excuse but a simple truth. A faint rustle moved through the gallery before a tall man in a dress uniform, bearing the insignia of a colonel and the authority of a former SEAL Team 3 commander, took the stand. His voice was measured yet unyielding. "I trusted Luna Moretti with the lives of my team. She did not just save her comrades, she upheld the very system that now sits in judgment of her." He submitted a series of documents into evidence, a confirmation letter from the Pacific Fleet Admiral, after-action reports, award citations, and most damning, a Department of Veterans Affairs error report. The attorney laid out the administrative breakdown that had stripped her of benefits, and no one in the room moved to object. An inspector general's finding confirmed that over 14 years, she had been denied $1,574 per month in benefits, along with medical and psychological support amounting to nearly $268, 0-inch unpaid aid. When the verdict was delivered, Luna did not celebrate. She did not smile. She only gave a small, quiet nod, and her attorney placed a hand on her shoulder, a silent acknowledgement that she was finally seen. Immediately, an emergency relief fund was approved, granting her not only the back pay, but also new housing, full medical rehabilitation, and ongoing mental health care. Her temporary apartment was in a quiet veterans housing complex, its windows opening onto a park. News outlets picked up the story, and it spread like fire across dry grass. The faded 2004 photograph of Luna carrying a wounded boy to a medevac helicopter resurfaced, now set beside the image of her at the defendant's table, a single frame holding both the hero and the forgotten. Somewhere in the system, a review began of veterans who had vanished from official records. But in that Seattle courtroom, what lingered was the stillness of something restored after years of silence. The question now was no longer whether justice would arrive in time. It was whether we still had the courage to ask how many other Lunas waited to hear their names spoken once again. In the weeks following the trial, images of Luna Moretti began flooding newspapers and social media. The most shared photograph did not show her in uniform or with medals, but as a thin, weary woman stooping to retrieve a dropped carton of protein milk at the curb, a faded U.S. Navy recruitment poster towering in the background. The contrast struck like a lightning bolt. A woman who had once risked everything for her country, now struggling simply to secure her next meal. The hashtag number Justice for Luna quickly trended nationwide. Veteran organizations, families of service members, and countless civilians who had never worn a uniform added their voices. Within months, the newly formed Moretti Foundation, dedicated to supporting veterans forgotten by the VA system, had raised over $4 million. In response to the outcry, Congress held a special hearing on lost records and the bureaucratic failures that caused veterans to disappear from the system. A sweeping review by the Department of Veterans Affairs uncovered nearly 11,000 similar cases, men and women living in the shadows, unasked after and unremembered. Luna never sought to be a symbol. She turned down most interview requests, refusing to be the object of pity. Instead, she visited rehabilitation centers, schools for at-risk youth, and juvenile detention facilities, speaking not about war or her medals, but about the fragile currency of faith and what happens when it is left to wither. Honor, she told a room of young inmates, isn't the ribbon on your chest, it's keeping your promise even when no one else remembers you made it. Her voice, quiet but unwavering, silenced the room. Later, at a Seattle event hosted by the Moretti Foundation, a bronze statue was unveiled, depicting the moment she carried a wounded Marine from Fallujah, crafted from the once classified photograph. The plinth bore the inscription, "Strength lies not in weapons, but in loyalty that never fades." The statue now stands in the city's Central Park, the same park where Luna had once slept behind a dumpster. It was a circle closed, an unspoken apology from a city that had once turned away. On Veterans Day, she wore her SEAL uniform for the first time in years, its fabric pressed, its epaulets heavy with hard-earned medals. As she stepped to the podium at the memorial, the entire crowd rose not in a choreographed tribute, but in a spontaneous wave of respect, from fresh recruits to retired generals. Luna said little. She simply scanned the crowd, her eyes no longer dulled by grief, and into the microphone spoke. Some things, if you wait long enough, justice will come back to find you. The applause was not explosive. It was deep and steady, the kind of sound given to someone who has traveled a road no one else dared walk. That afternoon, she sat beneath her statue, gazing up at the bronze face of the woman she once was, and nodded not to the past, but to the present that had finally restored her place. What would it mean if someone once forgotten by all became a living symbol to ensure no one else would ever be erased? Luna Moretti's journey was not only about reclaiming justice, it was a mirror reflecting that some wounds bleed without spilling blood, and some heroes do not need to be called by name to be known. In the noise of the modern world, sometimes the most powerful gift is a steady gaze that meets yours, a hand that reaches out, a reminder. I see you, you are still here. And if you have ever felt invisible, if you are still searching for your worth, remember justice may be late, but kindness is never out of time. Thank you for staying with this story until the very end. If Luna's journey has touched you, please leave a heart, share your thoughts in the comments, and pass this story on so her light can reach even farther. And don't forget to subscribe, so together we can continue uncovering the stories that must never be forgotten.